Hello YouTube, it's Noah from 10G Tech, and today I'm going to be explaining on the Tech Talk podcast, so the 10G Tech Talk podcast number 2, I'm going to be talking about what do I think about phones getting bigger. Alright, let's get started. So the first thing we have to know is that phones are generally getting bigger overall, the flagship devices specifically, and even the mid-rangers. It was kind of a period where the phones were getting around the iPhone 6 Plus time, that kind of era. The Note, like the body was massive, but once we got rid of bezels and the notches and hole punch cameras and all that, the phones had a lot more screen for the same size. So the body of the phone hasn't really necessarily gotten bigger. But phones, I feel like for me, are just too big overall. The problem is I don't want to make compromises to go for a phone like, let's say, the iPhone 12 mini. That's not the battery and all that. I don't want that, but I want a phone that is big, and that's why I like the Z Flip and all that. Those are super expensive for me, so I can't really afford those, even though I'd like to. But I just not a huge fan of how phones are getting way too big. It just seems like you can't even put it in your pocket. I like the pants and clothes that I wear have very big pockets, and it even is a little bit of a stretch to put a phone in a pocket like that. So it just goes to show that I think we need to change the way that our phones are designed, and I hope that flip phones, like not necessarily foldable phones, because those are like a regular big phone, like goes even bigger, but flip phones, so a regular size phone that becomes smaller. I hope those become really popular because that'd be awesome. So ideally, what we would want to have is the flip phones take over the market mostly, but I guess I could see the iPhone 12 mini and stuff going there if we make a breakthrough in battery technology. I think that'd be very interesting to see how those could be applied because then you kind of like have it where it was about a decade and a half ago or more, where there was either you get a flip phone or you get a candy bar phone or like a brick phone. So those are basically your options, and that'd be pretty cool to have again. But I'm not exactly sure if that's necessarily going to be the case. So overall, my opinion stays relatively the same. Where I'm not a huge fan of the phones getting bigger, but I'm not willing myself to make compromises to have a smaller phone. So that's where I hope that that phones it becomes popular for this to happen. So people and companies will want to make phones like flip phones, example. So those will become popular. They'll get new technologies and develop better. The hinge will become more solid. The screen won't have the big crease in the center anymore, and that'd be the ideal situation in my opinion. I don't know what other people think actually. I haven't really asked too many people if they like the way that phones are going now. I would assume that most people are not happy with phones being too big because they are too big. I think most people admit that phones are too big. They're turning into phablets. I mean, they've been phablets for a while, but just get a tablet then, because then you actually have a proper device that's been optimized to be that size rather than really long and kind of narrow, which is not the way that you'd want a tablet to be. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And if I were to come up for an explanation of why I think phones become bigger, it's because we expect them to do more nowadays. Phones are basically replacing our laptops and desktop computers, unfortunately, because as they get more powerful, I think that might be a thing where all you really need is a phone in the future. Maybe a phone and a tablet. I'm not exactly sure, but I think that phones are trying to make a takeover, and that's why we expect more to do our phones. And you can't do that much on a T9 phone. If you tried using a T9 phone in within the last month at least or year, you know how difficult it is to really do anything, even searching the web, which is something we do on our phones constantly all the time, all smartphones. But that isn't really easy to do on a T9. Even with the voice search, it's very clunky, and those were designed to make calls and texts, and that's really what they not even text calls. It was meant to do calls, and that was useful in 2004, in 2002. Not so much in 2021. We expect a lot more of our phones. So as unfortunate it is, it's not super practical to have a phone that's only like 2.4 inch or 1.2 inch screen and then like 2.4 inches in diagonal for the size. It's just a mini little pocket thing. You can fit in your coin pocket. That's not really the case anymore. You need like a handbag to put your phone in nowadays, but it's all because we expect them to do more. So we have to go back a little bit. You have to go forward to go back in terms of phones. We have to develop our phones ahead and say, okay, look, here's what we want it to do. Now, how do we do all this in a smaller form factor that's much better for everyone? So that's going to take time, and that will come with time, I hopefully. So we'll have to see what happens in the next decade or so, but I'm hoping that phones we've reached a point in phones where we know what we want our phones to do for the next while, and we can say, okay, look, we can make this smaller again, and then in the future it's going to repeat itself. It's like, okay, well, we need to do more now. Okay, make them bigger so we can get the features that we want on there, and then we can take it back again. So I think that's what's gonna happen. Remember, like really old phones, like 1989, those things were massive and heavy, and that's because we had to figure out a way to make them call. And they're like, okay, now that we made them call, let's make them smaller. So that's what's going to happen. So that's probably what I think is going to happen for the future of our phones. So if you enjoyed this 10G Tech Talk podcast, please subscribe to the channel. Let's try and get to 1,000 at some point. I hope for 1,000 before the end of the year, but that all depends on how much I upload, I guess. But anyways, thank you for viewing, and I'll see you in the next video.